It was good to see children practicing and learning the way they ought to. I came across little VIP Montessori some time back when the directress visited our Empathic Learning Center. It is so good to see that children are learning in a way that brain tracts would wire properly. Our brain is full of nerve cells and also full of chemicals. Even from the mother's womb, the brain is wiring, and recently medical research has found, using an instrument called the connectome, that the child in the mother's womb is already learning what the mother likes, even in food tastes. The flavors, the molecules get into the child's brain from the mother while in the womb, and when the child begins to feed, the child begins to like what the mother has liked. So you can see what an intricate design our brain has, and how tenderly and well and properly the brain should be managed in the early years of learning. In the first few months also, the mother's attitude to the child and the way mother bonds with the child is very important for attention. When a child has a problem, what goes wrong is the attention and the attention span, and the child develops inattention. Attention is something you give to your child, and child grasps attention. If you don't give the child attention, there is no way the child can learn attention, isn't it? Child can't learn or receive something you don't give. So when you do give the child attention, child's attention span improves, because you have in mind the fact that when the child is 5.5, he or she is going to school, and the very first year the child has to sit through half an hour of a period, which means you are looking at a child being able to do something for half an hour at a stretch by the time child is 5. And attention, like everything else, builds up gradually. So if the child does not develop this initiation and navigation and successful conclusion of what he has to do, the child becomes inattentive. So the proper way of learning and what the child starts doing is that when the child's executive empathic planning pathway in the prefrontal cortex, that's the front part of the brain, is put to work in proper learning, as you saw with so many projections there, the child begins to plan his actions very young. Even a crawling child crawls mathematically. That is to say, the child does not know to say 1, 2, 3, 4, but child knows to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Normally in my lectures I ask people to wave hands if you understand. I won't do it today, but I hope you grasp this. The child crawls mathematically, meaning child says, if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 times, I'll get to the skirt that is in the pantry that gives me the cookie. That's the kind of calculation that the child does. So the room for crawling, and then he initiates it. This is why an adult should be there for supervision to make the child initiate, then the child navigates, then the child goes to that successful conclusion, and at the end of the conclusion, the child gets a reward. If you don't initiate this, what the child will do is, the child gets into circular movements that has no proper pathway, and there's no end result. This is what happens with children who are made to use digital gadgets. It's a circular, a reflex thing. Child should be getting into executive and reflective things. Executive meaning he thinks, plans, and does to a successful conclusion. Reflex is that he or she does whatever that comes their way. This is what happens with the digital screen. Also, in the in the first year, a child begins to absorb the phonemes of a language, P-H-O-N-E-M-E-S, the structural units of a language, naturally. That's how the human brain is designed. And the phonemes are absorbed, structural units of the language are absorbed from the child hearing natural voice. The digital voice garbles the child's absorption. Other thing is speech, language and writing is a spatial activity. As you saw in the projections, our brain's infrastructure is spatial. That is, every movement a child does, circular or hand-mouth-eye coordination movement, that's what builds the infrastructure tracks, brain tracks of a child's brain. Now, when you give the child the digital screen, the child only does this. And many parents, they take pride in the fact that a child is able to do Viber or whatever. He's only doing this. Now, this is not a brilliant movement. This is actually a stupid movement, because the child's brain is not developing. When the child is doing what you saw the projection do, that is the way a child's brain gets infrastructure. Now, all of us can close our eyes and bring the point of the finger to the nose tip, isn't it? That is the very basic movement child must be encouraged to do to get his brain tracks infrastructure. If the child is limited to the 2D screen, that does not happen at all. The other thing is the 2D screen, the digital screen or the LED screen is two-dimensional. I call it 2D, meaning two-dimensional. Whereas all of normal life, seeing, touching is three-dimensional. So if you limit, when you give a child any digital gadget, the screen, touching or watching, child's spatial movements drastically reduce. Finger to mouth movement, finger moving into building blocks or whatever other things, it's drastically reduced. And the child's movement and even the bodily movement is drastically reduced. So the brain's basic feeding material of spatial movements is so badly reduced from handling 3D and seeing 3D to seeing 2D. I hope you understand this. So 2 into the power 2 is 4, 2 into the power is 3, 8 to 4 is a reduction of 50%. It's a serious problem. This is not just happenstance, it's a serious problem that a child is getting off what he is designed to do naturally, 3D, three-dimensional in all his movements and all his learning, and put him on the digital screen. Giving him a digital nanny is quite a drastic bad thing that you could do to a child. A few more things about this. So if the child does not get into this executive planning method, what happens is the child constantly is doing short span things. Attention span determines the child's memory recall. I'll repeat it. When a child is able to do something, let's say in the first 3 years, the doll wakes up and the child brushes the doll's teeth, and then the child dresses up the doll and gives the milk and then washes the mouth and then gives food and gives the books, and the doll goes to school. Now that is a successful conclusion, and this doll activity maybe at the age of 3 will take 10 to 15 minutes. The child's memory builds up according to the attention child gives undivided during that period of time for that doll activity. Same with building blocks. For any other thing the child does, arts and crafts, all that has to be done for a certain attention span to build up child's memory recall. When the child gets into handling digital gadgets, in between, the child never gets to doing one thing to a successful conclusion of 15 minutes at the age of 3. Of course, at the age of 4, you want to get the child to do something for 20 minutes, because the child has to go to school at the age of 5.5 and sit and go through for 30 minutes. You have this focus that child has to be built up with attention span and memory recall, which is all what learning is about. With the digital things, the child begins to do circular movements and multitasking. That meaning the child does something just for a few minutes, then does another thing for another few minutes, then goes to another thing, another thing, another thing. So even the number of toys that the child should have within his playpen or area of playing should be limited any day. Too many things in the child's grasp, child does nothing to a successful conclusion. Now, later in life, when children have not got to doing things to a successful conclusion, later in life, they lose this moral capacity to do something to a finish. They begin to want thrills in between, which is not a good thing. You have to wait for the right time for the thrill. With digital games, what happens to a child is, and many cartoons expose child to thrills and risk. So this doing things halfway or just doing so many things, child gets into a mood of stress, and most cartoons stimulate the stress center of the child. Child's prefrontal cortex in the outer upper part has the executive planning pathway, and the bottom part of the frontal cortex has the stress pathway. So when a child is made to do studies, as you saw it's happening, the learning procedure, as I said at the beginning, he initiates, navigates, come to a successful conclusion. That is called executive planning. And he does that developing empathy. When the child is not doing that, child is getting into a mode of reacting to any sound, any color, any little thing, and there's distraction and inattention. Too many things are coming into a child's developing brain tracts. That is called dyspathy. There's a new English word coined for this. Empathy is the child considering others, considering what he has to do and doing something to a successful conclusion. Dyspathy is getting distracted with other things, and the child has no concern for what he has been given, and he disrupts in between. In this way, the child's brain tracts not only lose the attention span, later they don't develop memory and recall is difficult, and the child becomes impulsive. Impulsivity is that the child, even in one place, he's all the time running inside. Inattention, impulsivity, then impulsivity leads to meaningless hyperactivity and a jitteriness. Now those are the three cardinal symptoms of what doctors diagnose as ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. But we are not looking at that, we are looking at the normal child, how to get the normal child to develop his executive planning pathways, good attention span, good memory recall, and the child being able to spatially develop his brain tracts. By the time the child is passing 12, brain tracts begin to get edited by a natural process. So before your child comes to 12, you must have good digital habits and good digital health for the child, which is equal to have good study methods and learning pathways for the child. When the child is passing 12, to correct the brain and make brain creative becomes difficult. So it is good for parents to take care of a child's digital habits early rather than late. By the time a child who has got used to too many cartoons, too many digital gadgets, too many digital games, passing 12, it becomes more and more difficult to correct the child. But when you are handling a child younger than 12, it is easy to correct the child. So even for our empathic learning center, that happens every Friday at 6:30, schools have begun to refer children for it. Normal children don't have to come for it. It is just if your child is getting too addicted to the digital screen, TV screen, then only the problem begins. We find correcting the child before 12 is much easier. After 12, the child begins to get more and more into that pattern of not doing something for the required attention span. Now, as you know, when the child is passing 12, attention span has to develop to 40 minutes. And which means during that 40 minutes, child has to recall what has been practiced with attention. What has not been practiced with attention, memory can't recall. When a child is given digital gadgets in between during that attention span, then his memory doesn't develop at all. Other thing is that the pixels compete with the neurons in the brain. The smartphones and iPads, tablets, they all have pixels, and smarter the phone, worse it is for the retina and to the brain. So PPI, that is pixels per inch concentration, the retinal one is 247. Smarter phones have even more than the retina, which means the retina is under stress to accommodate the pixel flashes. As you know, neurons are also electrical impulses. So a child needs to have reading habits and resting. Then the brain has a thing called default mode network, even with a child or with an adult. Child reads and sit back, and the default mode network takes over. That's how the child's attention and memory develops. But when the child is being bombarded by the pixels of the digital gadget, sound-wise, visually, colors-wise, child's neurons never come to rest. The child never gets a default mode network. And he's only interested then in fantastic things out of ordinary things. When he has to sit and do the normal things, he'll all the time say, bored, bored. And many cartoons, the color frequency change is not natural. In many cartoons, now I'm not talking about violent cartoons, I'm just talking about simple cartoons. The color change is too drastic, and the color contrast is too drastic. As you know, all of normal colors, natural colors is light green, light blue, and the color variation is very slow. In the cartoon, color variation is very fast, sound variation is very fast. Therefore, the child's color, sound, music tracks in the brain override the personal thinking, interpersonal communication, linguistic, and mathematical tracks. Brain has 7 tracks. First 4 are how I think, second how I communicate, 2 linguistic, 4 mathematical. Now those are the first 4. Next 3 are kinesthetic, how the child's movement develops, the musical and sound, and the visual and the spatial. With all the digital stimulation, the latter 3 override the first 4. What you get in the first 4? You get how the child thinks with empathy and develops learning, how the child will communicate what he has learned, and then the linguistic skill and the mathematical skill gets overshadowed by the digital stimulation that has gone on. So it's a serious problem. There are some books I have brought for a bookstall. You can take it. One book is called Parenting, Heart and Brain in an Age of Digital Domination. One book is called Mom and Dad, that's how you correct your child. It is so important to correct your child, not to give him retribution for his last error, but to give him redemption for his next attempt. That is to say, you don't correct the child saying, you did this, you are just like a big fellow, you did this. That's not the way to correct a child. Purpose of correction is not punishment for the last error. I hope you understood it. Purpose of correction is doing better in the next attempt, correct? That's why we correct a child. Other thing is how you stretch a child's performance. Your child should have maximum performance when he is doing his first graduate degree. You're not aiming at having your child's maximum performance in grade 4 or 5. So don't stretch your child. Child's brain plasticity, brain tract plasticity is like elastic. What happens if you stretch an elastic too much? It snaps, it fractures. So you must have the long-term plan that the child's performance should peak at his first graduate degree. That's going to be 21, 22, 23. So getting a child to do a graduate degree too early is not a good thing. So bombarding a child for peak stretch performance in studies, sports, elocution, music, you want to create an Einstein or a Newton or a Beethoven in 5 years, 7 years, that's not a good plan. So don't put too much stretch on the child. Stretch the child carefully and gradually. Finally, about sleep, all digital gadgets, the pixel stimulation upsets the neurons to such an extent, child doesn't fall into natural sleep. So all of child's exposure to the LED screen must stop 2 hours before child actually goes to sleep. I repeat it, all child's exposure to the LED screen, TV screen, smartphones, digital gadgets must stop 2 hours before child actually goes to sleep. If till the time child goes to sleep, he's watching something or he's into passive viewing because you are watching something, you understand passive smoking, isn't it? Similarly, there's passive viewing because you're watching something, child is watching. Now, child's watching must stop 2 hours before going to sleep. If not, child gets into fitful sleep, not natural sleep. In natural sleep, there's a God-designed software program in the brain. Sleep puts the neurons to rest. And we all wake up in the morning better people, isn't it? Aren't we better when we wake up in the morning than we went to sleep? Ladies, aren't you happy that your husband goes to sleep? Because he wakes up better. Same with children. And children must have that NREM, REM sleep cycles in deep sleep, which is affected, disturbed by LED screen. LED screen has a higher percentage of blue light, and now doctors are diagnosing AMD, age-related macular degeneration, with young 35-year-old executives because of too much smartphone use. That's by the way. As far as a child is concerned, don't give the child the LED screen. Stop it 2 hours before 2 hours before sleep. Finally, the best cartoon is the cartoon that the child does not watch. That's a slogan. So cut down on your child's cartoon life and bring it to a minimum. Not more than 25 minutes a day, not every day, not the same cartoon, and don't have collateral addiction that the child is buying a Ben 10 watch, Ben 10 boots, Ben 10 stickers. That kind of loyalty to a cartoon steals the child's heart from the loyalty the child should have for you. So don't make children loyal to aliens when they are very small. You're opening a door for outsiders to intrude and influence their life adversely. Thank you. Get some of the books before you go. I'm very happy for the VIP Montessori techniques. So many preschools entertain the child with the digital screen. I'm happy this Montessori does not do that. It's commendable. Thank you.